The terminal hummed with the orchestrated chaos of thousands of souls in transit, but Angela R. Carey stood frozen outside the women's restroom, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Miami International Airport stretched before her like a glass and steel labyrinth. Beautiful, cold, impersonal. Before we continue, thank you for spending your time with this story. If you're enjoying it so far, please like, watch till the end and subscribe. Her flight to Seattle, and the fragile promise of a new life that depended on boarding that plane in 90 minutes, seemed to be slipping through her fingers like water. At 28, Angela had dedicated 6 years to social work, pulling other women from the wreckage of abusive relationships, navigating crisis intervention and trauma counseling with the precision of a battlefield medic. But here in the sprawling maze of Terminal C, with her ex-boyfriend's men hunting her through the crowds, she found herself utterly, terrifyingly helpless. The concourse stretched endlessly in both directions, a disorienting river of travelers where every face could be a threat. Her phone buzzed again with another text from Marcus. "You can't run from me, Angela. I own you." She'd left her apartment at 3 a.m. with nothing but the clothes on her back and a backpack containing her entire life. Her friends, her family, her support system. Marcus had isolated her from all of it over 2 years of methodical control, and the airport staff seemed oblivious to the 2 men in dark jackets who'd been following her since check-in, their eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. Angela clutched the straps of her worn backpack, feeling the weight of everything she'd abandoned. Her one-way ticket had cost $287.50. Money that should have gone to rent, to food, to survival. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Miami's morning sun glinted off the tarmac, illuminating planes that would carry people to safety, to freedom, to destinations she might never reach. Then she saw him. Standing alone near the departure boards was a man who looked like violence personified. Mid-30s, dark hair slicked back with precision, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. But it wasn't the expensive tailoring that made travelers instinctively give him a wide berth. It was the tattoos creeping up from his collar to his jawline, the teardrop under his left eye, the way he held himself with the coiled stillness of a predator surveying his territory. Ryan G. Mendoza checked his watch. A Patek Philippe that could have funded Angela's escape 10 times over, and surveyed the terminal with the cold assessment of a man who saw people as assets or threats. At 35, he'd built an empire from nothing, clawing his way up from the streets after his sister's murder 15 years ago. He'd survived gang wars, federal investigations, and betrayals that would have broken lesser men, transforming himself into the kind of figure mothers warned their children about. But here, in the airport he secretly owned through a web of shell corporations, surrounded by the infrastructure of his money laundering operation. He looked exactly like what Angela needed, someone who could fight back. She'd spent 2 years letting Marcus make every decision, surrendering piece after piece of herself until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She'd counseled dozens of abuse victims to leave, to seek help, to trust their instincts. Now her own instincts screamed 2 contradictory messages. Run from that man and run to that man. Her gate was in Terminal D. Between her and safety stood security cameras Marcus might be monitoring, checkpoints where his connections could have planted corrupt TSA agents, and 800 yards of exposed concourse. She'd been walking for 20 minutes since spotting his men, following signs that seemed to lead her in circles, past the same Starbucks 3 times. Her backpack, stuffed with a change of clothes and documents proving Marcus's criminal activities, felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Marcus's latest text appeared. Gate D7. I know where you're going. My men are already there. Angela pulled at the collar of her gray jacket, feeling the fabric stick to her skin with anxious sweat. Through the windows, she could see planes taxiing, carrying passengers who weren't running for their lives, who didn't have to calculate whether asking for help would make them look weak or desperate or pathetic. The tattooed man's phone rang. He answered with a single word. "Speak," his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Angela watched him scan the crowd, his gaze passing over her without recognition, seeing through her the way everyone had for 2 years. She had 3 choices: try to reach her gate alone and hope Marcus's men didn't grab her in the crowd, hide in the bathroom and miss her flight entirely, or do something so reckless, so desperate, so completely insane that it might actually work. With her heart hammering against her ribs and Marcus's men closing in from 2 directions, Angela R. Carey walked directly toward the most dangerous-looking man in Miami International Airport and did the bravest, most foolish thing she'd ever done. She tapped his shoulder. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the terminal's ambient noise. "I need help." Ryan G. Mendoza turned slowly, irritation flickering across his features. He started to dismiss her with the cold efficiency he used on anyone who wasted his time. But when his eyes met hers, saw the raw terror there, the desperate courage it took to approach a man like him, something shifted behind his carefully constructed walls. For just a moment, he didn't see a stranger interrupting his phone call. He saw his sister Rosa, 15 years ago, looking up at him with that same expression, begging him to protect her, pleading with him not to fail her again. "Please," Angela continued, watching one of Marcus's men spot her from 30 yards away. "There are men following me, and I think they're going to hurt me." She took a shaking breath and delivered the line that would change both their lives. "You look like someone who could stop them." Ryan's first instinct was to break her wrist. Not out of malice, just reflex. In his world, uninvited touch meant attack, meant threat, meant someone had gotten too close to a man who controlled his space with lethal precision. His body tensed, muscle memory from 15 years of violence coiling through his shoulders before his conscious mind caught up and registered what he was actually seeing. Woman. Terrified. Trembling. Nothing. He should walk away. Should end this call with Miguel about the shipment coming through Terminal E tonight. Should dismiss this interruption with the cold efficiency that kept him alive and anonymous. Ryan G. Mendoza didn't help strangers. He used them, eliminated them, or ignored them entirely. "I need help," she whispered again, and something in her voice cracked through his carefully maintained walls. Ryan studied her with the assessment skills that had kept him breathing through 2 decades of gang warfare. Late 20s, exhausted beyond sleep deprivation, wearing clothes that had been nice once but were now wrinkled from desperate wear. The backpack clutched against her chest like armor. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Brown eyes holding that specific mixture of terror and determination he'd seen in only one other person's face. Rosa. The night before she died. When she'd asked him to walk her home from school because boys from the Sereno set had been following her. He'd told her he was too busy. Had a corner to work, money to make, reputation to build. 24 hours later, she was dead in an alley because her older brother had been too important, too focused on becoming someone dangerous, to protect the only person who'd ever believed he could be something better. "Sir, Angela started, mistaking his silence for rejection. "Who's following you?" Ryan heard himself ask, the words coming out before his better judgment could stop them. Relief and fresh fear warred across her face. "2 men in dark jackets. They work for my ex-boyfriend. She glanced over her shoulder, body language screaming prey animal. "He's connected. Has reach. And he said he'd kill me before he'd let me leave Miami." Ryan followed her gaze and spotted them immediately. Mid-30s, one with a badly concealed shoulder holster, moving through the crowd with the focused intensity of men on a job. Not Marcus's usual street dealers. These were hired muscle. Professional enough to worry about. "What did you do?" he asked, voice flat. "I left him." Angela's chin lifted despite the tremor in her voice. "I'm a social worker. I spend every day telling women they deserve better, that they should leave, that staying with an abuser doesn't make them weak but leaving makes them strong. And then I'd go home to Marcus and let him." She stopped, swallowed hard. "I couldn't save myself until I remembered I was worth saving." Something twisted in Ryan's chest, an emotion he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten its name. This woman, who looked like a strong wind could shatter her, had somehow found the courage to run from her monster, while he'd spent 15 years becoming one. "Your gate?" he asked. "D7. Boards in 75 minutes. Ryan's phone buzzed. "Miguel, boss, we need you in the operations room. Feds are sniffing around the cargo area." He should walk away. Should let this woman's problems stay her problems. Should maintain the ice-cold distance that separated Ryan G. Mendoza, the man from the empire he'd built on other people's suffering. Instead, he looked into Angela R. Carey's terrified eyes and made the first human decision he'd allowed himself in 15 years. "Stay close," he said. "And don't ask questions about where we're going." Ryan moved through the terminal like water flowing around obstacles. Smooth, purposeful, inevitable. Angela struggled to keep pace, her worn sneakers squeaking against polished floors as he led her away from the main concourse toward a service door marked, "Authorized person only." He didn't slow down. Didn't check for security. Just pressed his palm against a biometric scanner that shouldn't have been there. And the door clicked open with mechanical obedience. "Wait," Angela started. "You asked for help," Ryan said without turning. "This is what help looks like. Walk." The corridor beyond swallowed the airport's ambient noise like a throat closing. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating concrete walls and exposed pipes, the skeleton beneath the terminal's polished skin. Angela's social worker instincts screamed that she'd made a catastrophic mistake, that she'd traded one danger for something infinitely worse. But Marcus's men were behind her. And this stranger was moving forward with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where the cameras weren't. They passed a janitor emptying trash. An older Latino man who glanced up, made brief eye contact with Ryan, and gave the slightest nod. Not the acknowledgement of strangers sharing space. Something else. Something that looked like deference. 50 yards later, a security guard stood posted at an intersection of corridors. He wore the official Miami International uniform, radio clipped to his belt, hand resting casually near his sidearm. But when Ryan approached, the guard simply stepped aside, murmured "Patron," so quietly Angela almost missed it, and let them pass without question. "Who are you?" The question escaped before Angela could stop it. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he guided her through a maze of passages she hadn't known existed, arteries running beneath the airport's public face, carrying the lifeblood of luggage, supplies, and secrets. They passed a food service worker wheeling a cart of airline meals who nodded. A maintenance technician testing electrical panels who straightened slightly as Ryan walked by. A woman in business casual carrying a tablet who said, "Everything's quiet in D terminal, sir," before disappearing around a corner. Patron. The subtle choreography of respect and fear. "How much of this place belongs to you?" Angela finally asked, her voice echoing off concrete. Ryan stopped at an unmarked elevator, pressed the call button, and turned to face her for the first time since they'd left the main terminal. His eyes were dark, unreadable, dangerous in the corridor's harsh light. "All of it." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that felt obscene in the industrial silence. Ryan stepped inside and Angela hesitated at the threshold, suddenly understanding with crystal clarity that she wasn't being rescued. She was being claimed. "I can take you back," Ryan said, reading her hesitation. "Put you in the main terminal, point you toward your gate. Wish you luck with Marcus's men." His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Or you can get in this elevator and reach your flight alive. But you don't get to choose ignorance anymore. You tapped my shoulder. You asked for my help. And in my world, that means you're mine until you're safely on that plane." The word mine hung between them like smoke. Angela thought about Marcus, who'd used that same possessive language while breaking her down piece by piece. But Marcus's ownership had been about control. This man's ownership felt transactional. Protective custody with an expiration date stamped on her boarding pass. Behind them, somewhere in the labyrinth of service corridors, she heard footsteps. Heavy. Multiple. Getting closer. Angela stepped into the elevator. "Smart girl," Ryan said, and pressed the button for a floor that didn't exist on any public. The elevator descended 2 floors below ground level before the doors opened onto another service corridor. This one narrower, older, with exposed ductwork running like metal veins across the ceiling. Ryan stepped out first, positioning himself slightly ahead of Angela in a way that seemed casual but felt calculated. They'd walked maybe 30 feet when the footsteps she'd heard earlier materialized into bodies. 3 men, not 2. Marcus's original hunters plus reinforcement. A younger guy with gang tattoos crawling up his neck and murder in his eyes. They blocked the corridor ahead, spread out in a formation that said they'd done this before. The one in the middle, the older of the original pair, smiled without warmth. "Pretty bird flew into the wrong cage," he said. His accent thick Miami Street. "Marcus wants you home, Angela. Says he'll forgive you if you come quietly." Ryan didn't move. Didn't speak. Just shifted his weight almost imperceptibly, and Angela felt the air in the corridor change. Pressure dropping before a storm. "Walk away," Ryan said, his voice carrying the flat effect of someone stating facts rather than making threats. "This is your only warning." Tattooed kid laughed. "Old man, you got no idea who you're." Ryan moved. Angela had seen violence before. Domestic calls during her social work rotations, emergency room visits with clients, the night Marcus had put her through the coffee table. But she'd never seen anything like this. Ryan crossed the 15 feet between them in 3 strides. His fist connecting with the tattooed kid's throat before the laugh finished leaving his mouth. The sound was wet, crushing, final. The kid dropped, clutching his ruined windpipe, making noises that didn't sound human. The older one reached for his concealed weapon, but Ryan was already there, catching his wrist mid-draw and twisting with surgical precision. Bone snapped, radius, ulna, Angela's clinical mind catalogued automatically, and the gun clattered across concrete. Ryan's elbow came up hard into the man's face, a crack like a baseball bat hitting wood, and he went down in a heap. The third man ran. Mart. The entire encounter had taken maybe 8 seconds. Ryan barely looked winded. He straightened his suit jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and turned back to Angela with the same unreadable expression he'd worn in the elevator. She was shaking. Not from fear. From the realization that the most dangerous thing in Miami International Airport had just declared her off-limits. "You didn't have to do that," she heard herself say, though her voice sounded distant, disconnected. Ryan's eyes flickered to the men on the floor, one unconscious, one still struggling to breathe through his destroyed throat, then back to her. "Yes, I did." He moved closer, careful to keep his movements slow, non-threatening, as if he understood he'd just shown her the monster he'd spent 15 years becoming. When he spoke again, His voice carried something she hadn't heard before. Not quite gentleness. Maybe the memory of it. No one touches what's under my protection. The word protection hung between them in that blood-scented corridor, loaded with meanings Angela was only beginning to understand. Marcus had promised protection too. From a dangerous world, from loneliness, from her own bad decisions. His protection had felt like drowning. This felt like breathing. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. Miguel's calling security to clean this up. We need to move. Your gate's still 40 minutes away. And Marcus knows you're not traveling alone anymore. Angela looked at the broken men on the floor, then at Ryan's unmarked knuckles. His steady breathing, the cold calculation in his eyes that said violence was just another tool in his arsenal. She should be terrified of him. Instead, for the first time in 2 years, she felt safe. Ryan's office existed in the architectural dead space between terminals, a room that appeared on no public maps, accessible only through biometric locked corridors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the concourses below, offering a god's-eye view of the thousands of travelers who had no idea they were being watched. Angela stood at the glass, watching her gate in the distance. Gate D7. Freedom. 53 minutes away. Behind her, Miguel Cruz paced like a caged animal. Ryan's lieutenant was shorter, stockier, with scarring that suggested a history of violence survived rather than inflicted. His voice carried the exasperation of a man watching his boss make a catastrophic mistake. This is insane, Patron. One girl isn't worth exposing everything we've built. Miguel gestured at Angela without looking at her, as if she were a problem rather than a person. Marcus de Leon is connected. We put his men in the hospital, he'll escalate. And if the feds are already sniffing around cargo. I'm aware of the risks, Ryan said, his tone ending the argument. But Angela could see the chaos on his desk. Incident reports, shipping manifests, surveillance photos scattered like evidence of an empire barely contained. Her fingers itched with the same compulsion that made her organize intake files at the crisis center, the need to create order from catastrophe. She started stacking papers. Ryan and Miguel both stopped talking, watching her with identical expressions of confusion. What are you doing? Ryan asked. Helping. Angela aligned the reports by date, cross-referenced the manifests. You can't think clearly in chaos. My clients taught me that. When everything's falling apart, start with what you can control. She glanced up, caught Ryan studying her with something like fascination. I'm a social worker. Organizing disaster is literally my job description. Miguel's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. De Leon's at the main terminal. Brought 8 men. He's not leaving without her. Then he's not leaving, Ryan said simply. You're starting a war over a stranger. Miguel's voice rose. Help me understand why. Angela set down the stack of papers and turned to face them both. Her hands were steady now. The shaking from the corridor had burned away, replaced by the clinical clarity that kicked in when she had to deliver bad news to clients. Marcus isn't just a dealer, she said. He's connected to the Sinaloa pipeline. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. The meetings at our apartment, the men speaking Spanish he thought I couldn't understand, the manifests I found in his safe. She looked directly at Ryan. He's using Miami International to move product. Has been for 6 months. And if he's operating here without your knowledge. The temperature in the room dropped. Ryan's expression didn't change, but Angela watched something lethal slide behind his eyes. Miguel. Pull surveillance from all cargo areas. Last 6 months. Cross-reference with De Leon's known associates. Patron. Now. Miguel left, muttering prayers in Spanish. Ryan approached the window, standing close enough that Angela could see his reflection in the glass beside hers. You're telling me Marcus has been running pipeline through my airport, my territory, without permission, without tribute. I'm telling you he's using me as a distraction, Angela said. While you're protecting me, he's moving a shipment. I heard him on the phone this morning before I ran. Something about a Friday delivery. Gate E12. Ryan pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. That's 40 minutes from now. So this was never about me, Angela said quietly. He knew I'd run to the airport. Knew I'd cause enough chaos that your security would be focused on the terminals instead of cargo. Ryan's jaw tightened. He underestimated how much chaos you'd cause. He turned to face her fully. And who you'd cause it with. Through the window below, Angela could see Marcus's men spreading through the concourse like infection through healthy tissue. Hunting her. Using her. She'd spent 2 years being Marcus's pawn. She was done playing his game. So what now? She asked. Ryan's smile was cold, predatory, and absolutely terrifying. Now we show Marcus what happens when you move product through someone else's kingdom. Ryan left to coordinate his response. Miguel, security feeds, men repositioning throughout the terminal like chess pieces. Angela was alone in the office with the view of thousands of oblivious travelers and the weight of choices she was only beginning to understand. She shouldn't have been snooping. But social workers developed instincts about the things people hid, and the silver frame turned face down on Ryan's credenza practically screamed secrets. Angela picked it up. A teenage girl smiled back at her, maybe 16, with Ryan's dark eyes and defiant chin, wearing a quinceañera dress the color of champagne. Joy radiated from the photograph like light, the kind of pure happiness that exists before the world teaches you fear. Put that down. Angela jumped. Ryan stood in the doorway. His expression unreadable but his body language screaming violation. She set the frame down carefully, face up this time. Your daughter? She asked, though she already knew the answer from his age, the dates, the grief carved into his features. My sister. Ryan crossed to the credenza, picked up the photo, studied it like he was memorizing something already burned into his soul. Rosa. She died because I couldn't protect her. The words came out flat, factual, but Angela heard the lifetime of guilt underneath. She waited. Silence was a tool. One of the first things they taught in crisis counseling. People filled silence with truth. She was 16, Ryan finally said. Smart. Wanted to be a teacher. Used to help neighborhood kids with homework every afternoon in our apartment courtyard. His thumb traced the frame's edge. Serenos were moving into our territory. I was 19, stupid, thought being in a gang made me powerful. Rosa begged me to walk her home from school. Said boys were following her. He set the photo down, faced the window instead of Angela. I told her I was too busy. Had a corner to run, reputation to build. 24 hours later, she was dead in an alley. Crossfire between sets. She'd been walking home alone because her older brother was too important to protect her. Angela's chest tightened. She'd counseled enough trauma to recognize the kind of guilt that doesn't fade. It just burrows deeper. So you became this, she said quietly. Built an empire so you'd never be powerless again. I became a monster so I could kill all the other monsters. Ryan's reflection in the glass looked hollow. 15 years. I don't even recognize who I was before Rosa died. I do, Angela said. He's the man who helped a stranger in an airport. Ryan turned, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his face before he could bury it. Angela took a breath. Fair was fair. He'd shown her his wound, she owed him hers. 2 years ago, I met Marcus at a community outreach event. He was charming, attentive, said he admired my work. 6 months later, he hit me for the first time. Said I'd embarrassed him in front of his friends. She touched her ribs unconsciously, remembering. It escalated. Isolation. Control. The kind of abuse I spent every workday helping other women escape. Why didn't you leave? Same reason your sister walked home alone. I thought I deserved it. That I'd done something wrong. That if I just tried harder, loved better, fixed myself. She laughed bitterly. 3 weeks ago he put me through a coffee table. Broke 2 ribs. I finally understood what I'd been telling my clients all along. It doesn't get better. It just gets fatal. Ryan was watching her with an intensity that should have felt invasive but somehow didn't. I told myself I was helping troubled clients because I couldn't help myself, Angela continued. You became a monster because you couldn't save her. We're both running from the same thing, powerlessness. The silence stretched between them, heavy with recognition. Miguel says your gate boards in 35 minutes, Ryan finally said. And Marcus's shipment arrives in 20. Ryan's phone buzzed. He checked it, and something predatory slid across his features. The monster she'd glimpsed in the service corridor, now fully awake. Then let's make sure he loses both. The security monitors lit up like a Christmas tree. Red alerts cascading across screens as facial recognition tagged Marcus De Leon entering through the main terminal. Not alone. Never alone. 8 men flanked him in a formation that screamed cartel muscle, moving through TSA with the casual arrogance of people who owned the checkpoints they were passing through. Hijo de puta bought his way through security, Miguel muttered, tracking their movement across multiple camera feeds. He's heading straight for Terminal D. Angela's blood turned to ice water. She watched Marcus on the screen. His familiar swagger, the way he commanded space, the predatory scan of the crowd that had once made her feel protected and now made her feel hunted. Ryan stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the controlled violence radiating off him like heat. His phone buzzed continuously. Texts from his network throughout the airport, pieces of a tactical picture assembling in real time. Boss, we've got a bigger problem, Miguel said, pulling up another feed. Federal agents. 3 of them. Been watching cargo operations all morning. They're positioned near Terminal D now, probably waiting to see what Marcus does. Ryan's jaw tightened. Angela watched his reflection in the monitor glass, saw him calculating odds, weighing options, running through scenarios with the cold efficiency of a man who'd survived 2 decades by making brutal choices. We move her to the safe house, Miguel said. It wasn't a suggestion. Private plane out of Opaloca in 2 hours. She misses this flight but stays breathing. Marcus gets nothing. Feds get nothing. We protect our operations. That keeps me in Miami, Angela said quietly. Trapped in your world instead of his. Miguel shot her a look that said her preferences were irrelevant. You're alive. That's what matters. But Ryan was staring at the monitor showing Terminal D, at Gate D7 where Angela's flight to Seattle, to freedom, to the life she'd risked everything to claim, would board in 45 minutes. She gets on that plane, Ryan said. Patron. She gets on that plane, Ryan repeated, his voice carrying the weight of command. We escort her publicly. Terminal D. Full visibility. Miguel's face went pale. You'll expose yourself. The feds are waiting for exactly this. You stepping into the light. They'll have photos, witnesses, evidence that connects you to the airport operations. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Everything we've built. 15 years of staying invisible. You're throwing it away for what I should have done 15 years ago. Ryan turned from the monitors, and Angela saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not the cold calculation of a kingpin. Something raw, more human. I let Rosa walk alone because protecting her would have exposed me to rival sets. Made me vulnerable. And she died. This is different. This is exactly the same. Ryan's voice was quiet but absolute. And I'm choosing differently this time. The office fell silent except for the hum of surveillance equipment and the distant white noise of the terminal below. Angela understood what he was offering. Not just protection, redemption. His chance to rewrite the moment that had broken him. Her chance to reclaim the freedom she'd bled for. The feds will make you, Miguel said, one last desperate attempt. Photos, testimony, connections. You'll be compromised. Ryan pulled on his suit jacket, adjusted his cuffs with the practiced precision of a man preparing for war. His phone buzzed again. Marcus was entering Terminal C, 20 minutes from Terminal D. Get everyone in position, Ryan said, his tone ending all debate. Security checkpoints, every man we have. We're walking to Terminal D. Miguel stared at him like he was watching his boss commit suicide in slow motion. Then, with the loyalty of a soldier who'd follow his commander into hell, he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Ryan turned to Angela, offered his arm like they were heading to dinner instead of a battlefield. Ready. Angela took his arm, felt the solid strength beneath the expensive fabric, and nodded. Let's go catch a flight. They emerged from the service corridors into Terminal C like sharks rising from deep water. Sudden, inevitable, dangerous. The transition was jarring. From concrete and fluorescent anonymity into the glass cathedral of the public terminal, where thousands of travelers moved in choreographed chaos, oblivious to the violence about to erupt in their midst. Ryan's presence changed the air itself. Angela felt it immediately. The way people's eyes slid past him, the unconscious widening of space, the primitive instinct that recognized apex predators even when dressed in Armani. His men materialized from the crowd like ghosts taking form. A janitor near the gate entrance, a businessman reading a newspaper, a TSA agent at the checkpoint. Invisible perimeter forming, collapsing inward with them at its center. They walked toward Terminal D. Ryan's pace was unhurried, almost leisurely, but Angela recognized the controlled violence in every step. This was a man who'd walked into hostile territory before. Who'd survived by projecting such absolute danger that smart people simply moved aside. Travelers parted without knowing why. A mother pulled her daughter closer. A businessman on his phone stopped mid-sentence, watching them pass. Even the departure announcement seemed too quiet, as if the airport itself was holding its breath. He's here, Ryan said quietly, his eyes tracking something ahead. Angela followed his gaze and saw Marcus. Her ex-boyfriend stood near gate C-42, flanked by 8 men in matching leather jackets. Cartel muscle, professional and lethal. Marcus looked different than the charming man she'd met 2 years ago. Harder. Meaner. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the violence underneath that she'd spent so long making excuses for. Their eyes met across the concourse. Marcus smiled, cold and possessive, and started walking toward them. Ryan's hand touched Angela's elbow, gentle despite the tension coiling through his frame. When this starts, get behind me and run for gate D7. My men will get you on that plane. I'm not leaving you to clean up my mess, Angela said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. This stopped being your mess the moment you asked me for help. Marcus was 50 yards away now. 40. his men spreading out in a practiced formation. Angela spotted the federal agents Ryan had mentioned. 3 men in suits pretending not to watch, but their body language screamed law enforcement. They'd positioned themselves with clear sight lines, hands near concealed weapons, sensing something major about to break. The terminal had gone quiet. Not silent. Announcements still echoed, children still cried, luggage wheels still rattled, but the human noise had dropped to a murmur. People felt the predators circling even if they didn't understand what they were witnessing. "Angela!" Marcus's voice carried across the space, false warmth hiding threats. "Baby, we need to talk. You're confused. Scared. But I forgive you. Come home and we'll forget this ever happened." Ryan kept walking, each step deliberate, territorial. They were 30 yards from Marcus now. 25. Close enough to see the muscles in Marcus's jaw tighten when Angela didn't respond. Close enough to see his men's hands drift toward concealed weapons. "Last chance, Angela," Marcus called out, his voice harder now. "You're making this difficult. And you know I hate difficult." Ryan stopped walking. The sudden stillness was more threatening than movement. He looked at Marcus the way a king might look at a peasant who'd forgotten his place, with cold, absolute certainty. "She's under my protection," Ryan said, his voice carrying despite its quietness. "Walk away, De Leon. While you still can." Marcus's eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering across his features. He'd heard the name, knew who was standing between him and his property. But pride and rage made men stupid. "You're interfering in cartel business," Marcus said. "That's a mistake you won't survive." Ryan's smile was a predator's smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Then let's see who survives." Gate D7 flashed on the departure board. Now boarding. The space between them collapsed to 15 feet. In. Close enough that Angela could see the vein pulsing in Marcus's temple, the cocaine residue at the edge of his nostril, the rage turning his knuckles white where he gripped his phone. "She's mine," Marcus said, voice low and venomous. "And you're interfering in cartel business. Sinaloa doesn't forget. Doesn't forgive. Walk away now or what?" Ryan's interruption was surgical, precise. "You'll move more product through my airport without permission. Use my infrastructure, my security blind spots, my cargo routes." He took a single step forward, and Marcus's men tensed. "You thought you were clever, De Leon. Using the girl as distraction while you ran your shipment through Gate E12. Marcus's face went pale. "How did you? This is my airport." Ryan's voice carried across the terminal, and Angela watched dozens of airport employees, security guards, maintenance workers, ticket agents, all turn to look at him with recognition that bordered on reverence. "That's my terminal. Those are my cameras. Every inch of this place from the runways to the restrooms answers to me." The terminal had gone absolutely silent. Even the departure announcements seemed to pause. Travelers stood frozen, phones out, recording something they didn't fully understand but knew was significant. Federal agents moved closer, forming a loose semicircle. Angela spotted their hands hovering near weapons, eyes tracking the cartel members with predatory focus. "And she," Ryan's hand moved to Angela's shoulder, the touch simultaneously protective and possessive, "is under my protection." The words landed like an execution sentence. Marcus's eyes darted from Ryan to his men to the federal agents to the dozens of airport employees now watching with unblinking attention. Angela could see the calculation happening behind his rage, the dawning realization that he'd brought a knife to a gunfight, that he was standing in someone else's kingdom making demands he had no power to enforce. "You can't," Marcus started. "I'm not yours, Marcus." Angela's voice cut through his objection, steady and clear. She stepped forward, out from behind Ryan's protective stance, and faced the man who'd spent 2 years teaching her she was worthless. I never was. You don't own me. You don't control me. Her hands were shaking but her voice held firm. And I'm not running anymore, I'm leaving. There's a difference. Marcus lunged forward, rage overriding survival instinct. Ryan's men materialized instantly. The janitor's mop handle became a weapon. The businessman's newspaper concealed a sidearm. The TSA agent's hand went to his holster. Marcus froze mid-step, suddenly aware of just how completely outmatched he was. Boss! One of Marcus's cartel members, older, smarter, grabbed his arm. We need to leave. Now. The standoff broke like a fever. Marcus's men backed away slowly, hands visible, making no sudden movements. Ryan's security formed a corridor, silently escorting them toward the exit. Marcus shot Angela one last look of pure hatred, but it was impotent now. Me. Mr. Mendoza. One of the federal agents approached, badge out. Agent Hartley, FBI. We need to ask you some questions about. He saved my life. Angela stepped forward before Ryan could respond. Her social worker training kicked in. Control the narrative, establish credibility, protect the vulnerable. Even when the vulnerable was a mafia boss. My ex-boyfriend is involved in human trafficking. He was going to force me back to Miami, sell me to pay off debts. Mr. Mendoza intervened when I asked for help. Hartley's eyes narrowed, clearly not buying the full story but unable to disprove it. Other travelers were nodding, phones still recording. In their videos, they'd seen a well-dressed man protecting a terrified woman from aggressive pursuers. The optics were clean. We'll need statements from both of you, Hartley said. After she boards her flight, Ryan replied. It wasn't a request. Gate D7. Now boarding. You can question me all you want after she's safely in the air. Hartley looked like he wanted to argue. But the crowd was watching, cameras were rolling, and the woman's story checked enough boxes. Fine. But you don't leave this airport. Ryan nodded once, then turned to Angela, his expression softening in a way she suspected few people ever witnessed. Go catch your flight. Angela's hands shook as she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, not from fear this time, but from the adrenaline crash of survival. The agent smiled, scanned the barcode, and said the words Angela had been desperate to hear for hours. Welcome aboard, Miss Carey. She walked down the jetway on legs that felt borrowed, found her seat by the window, and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Below, through the terminal windows, she could see Ryan surrounded by federal agents. He stood with the same controlled stillness she'd witnessed in that first moment when she tapped his shoulder. Dangerous, composed, utterly in command despite the interrogation closing around him. Their eyes met across the impossible distance. He gave her the smallest nod. Permission. Benediction. Goodbye. Angela reached into her jacket pocket for her phone and found something else. A slip of paper she hadn't put there. Elegant handwriting, a phone number, and a single line. For when you're ready to teach a monster how to be human again. The plane's engines hummed to life. Angela clutched the paper like a lifeline and watched Miami International Airport shrink beneath her, carrying Ryan and his empire and his violence and his unexpected kindness into memory. 6 months later, Seattle rain drummed against the windows of the crisis center Angela had spent 8 weeks building from nothing. The domestic violence support group sat in a circle. 7 women at various stages of leaving, surviving, healing. Angela recognized herself in each of their faces. You're safe here, she told them, the same words someone should have told her years ago. And you're worth saving. After the session, she checked the center's funding account and froze. Another anonymous donation. $16,000. The third this month, always in amounts that seemed random until you knew the pattern. $1,600. Rosa's birthday, January 16th. $7,240. Her death date, July 24th, at 1900 hours military time. Now $16,000. Rosa's age when she died. Angela pulled the worn paper from her wallet and dialed the number she'd memorized but never called. He answered on the first ring. Angela. Just her name, but she heard everything in it. Relief, question, hope. Ryan. Her throat tightened. The donations. Rosa's dates. I'm trying to build something different. His voice carried an exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. Using what I have to help instead of hurt. Funding shelters, crisis centers, legal aid for women leaving dangerous situations. It's harder than killing. The hardest things usually are, Angela said softly. She watched rain streak down the window, thought about the distance between Miami and Seattle, between monster and man. When can you visit? Silence. Then. You sure you want a man like me anywhere near what you're building? I'm sure I want the man who saved my life to learn he's worth saving too. 2 weeks later, Angela stood in the crisis center lobby watching a town car pull up through the rain. Ryan emerged. No suit today, just jeans and a dark jacket that didn't quite hide the tattoos crawling up his neck. He looked uncertain, vulnerable, more dangerous in his humanity than he'd ever been in his power. I don't know how to do this, he said when he reached her. Help people without using violence. Build instead of destroy. Angela smiled. The same smile she'd give any client on their first day, choosing different. That's why you're here. You saved me from Marcus. Now let me help save you from yourself. She held out her hand, not as a victim seeking protection, but as an equal offering partnership. Ryan looked at her hand for a long moment, at the choice it represented, the vulnerability, the chance at redemption he'd thought was 15 years too late. Then he took it. Where do we start? He asked. Angela led him inside, where 7 women waited for a support group on healing from violence. Ryan G. Mendoza, who'd spent 15 years as a monster, took a seat in the circle and began the hardest work of his life. Learning how to be human again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and share for more stories like this.